Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. Today I am interviewing Jasper. Jasper is one of the leading heads of CRO over at Golden Web, a SEO agency for e-commerce owners who I'm very good friends with. So Jasper is going to come on and talk all about the different ways you can do CRO for your e-commerce store. And to me, this is one of my favorite things to do when you buy a business, because it's basically taking the same exact traffic and asking, how can I get more customers without necessarily getting more traffic, which I think is always great because that helps you, whether you're scaling a campaign or maintaining a campaign, it helps you bring in more revenue. So with that said, let's get into it and I'll see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, and today I am speaking with Jasper de Muynck, and I have terribly butchered your last name because we were practicing it offline a few times. So apologies there, but Jasper works for Golden Web and he is a master of CRO. But for everyone listening, Jasper, that doesn't know who you are, doesn't know Golden Web, doesn't know what you guys do, why don't you introduce yourself, where you are in the world, and what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So Jasper, 26. I live in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It's kind of, a lot of big expats live here, kind of SEO community as well. This is a very kind of peaceful place in the mountains, lots of nature. So yeah, love it here.
Yeah, the mecca of the digital nomads.
Pretty much.
Excellent. Well, what were you doing before you started working with Golden Web? Were you always in CRO or were you doing something else?
So right around the time I met Benjamin about 4 years ago, I just got started in CRO right after I met him, because I met all of these new friends. I came from a small city, didn't know any kind of entrepreneur. First time I spoke to an entrepreneur, I could barely speak. I was like so nervous, like, I can't believe like this person flies like jets and stuff. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then it kind of becomes normal. But I got started as a personal trainer a long time ago, then did personal training for a long time. Then I got really into personal development. Basically got this download of like, wow, you can actually. I was always addicted to video games as a kid. Video games, but I never understood you can get really good in real life and just kind of master your own kind of character tree in that way. So the moment I understood that, I was like, wow, and just started learning personal development, learned all of that, then got very much into coaching. And so it was just a very natural extension of personal training, because most people, they know how to train and like pick up a weight, they don't know how to actually stick to whatever they want, in terms of just discipline and such. So that's what I did. Coached some executives, like entrepreneurs, creatives, that kind of stuff. And it was going decently well. Just, to be honest, I made enough money to live, but that was pretty much, it. And I was like, okay, this doesn't sound very sustainable. Saw what everybody else was doing. Saw Benjamin crushing it like with an agency model. And I was just like, okay, this sounds really interesting. And then I was like, really the way I figured out that I wanted to do CRO is I just looked at what all my friends were doing, which did not include CRO. And then I just did some research of like, hey, what are the options? And you have this like beautiful kind of intersection that CRO is, of like, just, I think, really nice intersection of like art and science. It's very much about, designing something that is aesthetic, something that tells a story and gets people, to take a certain action and move them in a certain way. But at the same time, it's very data driven. You can get very geeky about it. And so then I was just like, yeah, this sounds like something that is right for me.
No, that's great. And I think, my SEO friends, Benjamin is probably a little bit excluded from what I'm about to say, because he actually does do quite a bit of like really good marketing. But a lot of my SEO friends ironically don't understand marketing.
Mhm.
They understand how to rank, but they don't understand the art of it, like the psychology behind it, like what you're saying with the story. But before we move into CRO, most important question of the entire episode, what was the kind of video games you played?
Everything, just lots of like shooters, just whatever you could be very competitive in.
All
Counter
right. So
Strike, this kind of stuff. In some niche game, I was one of the best, but it was a very small game. So it's kind of like if you're the best in like a game, but like maybe 20,000 people play, like how impressive is that really? But yeah, just really geeky about this stuff.
we've been doing this podcast for so long. I've met so many entrepreneurs, and a very common trait in our crowd of digital entrepreneurs is like a love for video games. And I found that SEOs, they tend to be strategy, like real time strategy games like StarCraft or something, right? And
Interesting.
then
I love
these
StarCraft as well.
yeah. Well, I have a friend that was like one of the ways he hired SEOs. Like if you found out that they played StarCraft, like you're in. You know, that you're gonna be good. I have this correlation data. But then like my media buyer and CRO friends are often like the first person shooter ones, the competitive ones. Like I gotta get that ROAS up, you know. I'm a
Interesting.
RPC guy, so of course I'm a brand strategist, right? So, but let's move to CRO, man. I'm curious. I think CRO is one of the most important things that people just don't do enough of. Like if someone buys a business from me, the very probably the second thing I guess that I tell them to do is you should do a CRO. And even the first thing is technically related to CRO because I always tell them to test pricing. But I don't think enough people do CRO, and when they do it, they don't ever return to it because they just think like, oh, I did that, don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah,
But like,
look
no,
at the
there's
best
always
practices.
yes,
We're
exactly.
good.
Right, like good enough, I guess, right? But
Yeah.
you can leave so much money on the table with the same amount of traffic if you don't do CRO. So talk to me about what the fundamentals are. When it comes to e-commerce, Shopify store owners, like what should entrepreneurs focus on with CRO?
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so to kind of backtrack for anyone, that's maybe not fully familiar, it's essentially with conversion rate optimization. It sounds conversion rate. It's a lot more than just get more people to buy, right? It's get more people to buy, I guess, at the optimal price point and actually doing so in a way that benefits the customer experience so that they preferably come back for more, they have a good overall experience with the brand. So that's first of all. And then it also trickles down, of course, across the entire organization. But let's get into that later. In terms of the things to focus on, if you think like very high level, I guess conversion rate, five main variables you need to think about. So it's motivation, most important thing, what's in it for the customer, like actually creating that bridge, not just talking about your features and the specifics, talking about, hey, how does this actually impact that person's life? Value, so why should they buy from you specifically? Trust, can I believe that you deliver what you promise? Friction, so how easy is it to actually complete a purchase? And then incentives, so any kind of, oh, you can get a great deal, sale, all of this stuff. Especially if people just get started, it's something that people very heavily push on, this kind of, sale, all of this stuff. And really, without all these other things, it matters the least. Then, in terms of outside of conversion rate, average order value, especially in the early stages, and it's something I focus on more and more and more. At the beginning, when I started with conversion rate optimization, I was very much okay. Let's just improve the conversion rate, but especially with a company that is kind of getting stuck a lot of times, they just don't really have that compelling of an offer. There's a lot of ways to just drive up the average order value, whether it be buy more, get more, any kind of starter kits, adding free gifts with the first order. With one of our clients, we don't even have really like free gifts. There's one mystery gift, and all the other stuff, it's we present it as free gifts, but they're not even actually gifts, and it's still like absolutely crushes. It's basically like money back guarantee, like an ebook. I guess it's a gift, but it's kind of like I wrote the ebook, so it's actually very very good. But
Not,
it's
not to brag or anything, but
I'm very proud of that book. But generally speaking, it's like people don't really buy a product to then start reading information, but it still drives up this overall perceived value of you get this entire package. So that's something that I'm really big on. Any kind of free shipping thresholds, this kind of stuff is pretty common, but just actually highlighting that stuff, not just maybe in the top bar one time like this. Most people don't actually see these tiny blocks, so people need to be reminded of this kind of stuff repeatedly. And then any kind of other stuff like bundling, complete the look after people complete a purchase, post purchase, multiple step flows, all of that stuff. It can add like 30, 40, 50% to the amount of your average order value. And if you're able to spend that much more on actually getting a customer, it makes a massive difference.
oh, absolutely. There's a funny story I always think of when I think about like e-commerce checkouts. I have this friend. He used to sell these like I think it was sponges. It was insanely priced sponges though, like very, very,
Interesting.
very expensive. He used pretty hardcore direct response copy on it. But one of the things he did on the checkout, like the upsell, you would do order bumps like, would you like 5 sponges instead of one, something like that. But he ended up going to this ridiculous level where you could buy 200 sponges from him at once or some crazy number, and he'd get people buying it. And this was
That's
obviously the
amazing.
most profitable thing he sold, right? I mean, not many people did it, but the ones that did it really brought the average order value up, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, God, this is crazy. And I got thinking about it because I've told that story to a few friends. And they're like, no one would ever do that. That guy must be lying. But then I thought about myself, like, if I was in the market for sponges, I probably would do that too, because I never want to be in the market for sponges again. Like, I just like, let's get like a whole treasure hoard of them, and I never have to do this experience again.
No, for sure. I mean, it's also, like, I guess with a lot of different things, like maybe, I don't know what the exact sponge is, but like maybe you want to work on your bike, or like, I don't know, maybe it's a mechanic or whatever. Like you go through, sponges quite fast. So it's always good to just tailor to all the different personas.
For sure, for sure. I like what you said about talking about the motivation, the psychology of it all, because I do think a lot of people focus. I mean, it's not bad; it's important, but the mechanical aspects of the CRO versus the psychology of the CRO,
100%. Yeah,
I think that like both are equally important in a lot of ways. When
for sure.
you are like onboarding a new client for CRO, or maybe they've done some CRO themselves, what do you think is like the common mistakes people make, or the common misconceptions people have about CRO?
Just very much focusing on the small stuff. I think that's like the biggest thing. It's especially, I mean, we get a lot of people, through like kind of our own funnel. And right now it's set up in a way where a lot of it comes even from the SEO side. So people are not very kind of educated on CRO. Of course, if they have a higher revenue store, then they'll have a general understanding. I think the biggest thing is that they do not understand their customer as well as they should. Like, it's kind of like a marketing buzzword almost of, understand your customer better than like they understand themselves. But, from my background in coaching, like this is a real thing. Like people do not understand why they take the actions that they take. And if you're able to kind of actually go into that psychology and really dive deep into, hey, what keeps them up at night? What are their fears, their desires? You can just speak to them in a certain way to where you're automatically pretty much the only option in the marketplace, because you show that you really understand.
Absolutely. I always call it speaking the words of their world, right? Like
Yeah.
with Empire Flippers, I deal with a lot of different entrepreneurs, like agency owners, e-commerce store owners, SaaS owners, affiliate site owners, and they all are talking about the same thing, just using different words to talk about that same thing. And it's always fear and pleasure, right? The get away from the pain or get towards the pleasure. Pain is always the stronger motivator, of course. But yeah, I agree with that. Do you see something like with the small mistakes? Would it be something like, let's make the button green instead of red? Is
This
that
kind of stuff, yeah, it's like
yeah.
just, or testing like very small sections, like it's just, and or even like, another thing. I guess we're going to talk about it later, but it's like, actually, let's take a step back and like let's figure out where you are actually like bleeding money. Like it's very cool now that you want us to start testing stuff, and you're like, hey, let's test this and this and this. Like let's take a step back, let's actually look at the data and where you're losing most of the customers, and like let's focus our efforts on fixing that instead of this thing that's already almost there.
That is a very good, keen insight. I think when people, especially if they like first get into business, they run their first ad and they lose all the money. Like, I'm a failure, like, well, like
Yeah,
if you ran an ad and you made $500 of revenue and say you lost, I don't know, $50, and it's the first go, like that's not a failure. That's a
that's
success. You're like
beautiful.
really close,
People
right?
want to buy your stuff, right? That's
Yeah,
like
yeah. Like
that's like
there's
a very
exactly.
strong signal.
Yeah. Like you made money. I was giving
For
advice
sure.
to one of my wife's friends who has this like TikTok on like car painting or something like that. And he wanted to open up a whole mechanical shop for this. Like, dude, let's slow down here. Let's see if we could get anyone to give you $1 first, like get a
Yeah.
sponsorship before you like go and spend like 300 grand on a mechanic shop. Right. Yeah. I love the red button to green button that people do because they think that's CRO, but I'd be curious on like how you do your process. So like in my mind, when I think of it, it's always like your offer. And then like that's what I'm testing, like different kind of offer angles and then different angles of the winning offer, then the copy, and then from the copy is creative. And then maybe like, okay, let's test the color of the buttons or whatever. Is that kind
Mhm.
of a similar framework that you follow?
I've never thought about like properly frameworking it in that way, but yeah, I mean that is pretty much what we do. So first of all, so maybe some nuances to like explain. So anytime we take on a new client, we start with a full CRO audit. So we try to figure out just all the different data points that you have available as of now. Let's just delve through all of them and let's kind of create our initial hypotheses of, hey, these are the issues. But then most importantly, also, this is your exact target audience, like we just spoke about. Like, so one of the things we like to do is to scrape as much voice of customer data as we can, like going through, customer support tickets, all of the reviews that you have. If you don't have that many reviews, we go to all of your biggest competitors that are with the most similar target audience, we scrape all of those reviews. Then you just analyze all that data, gives you very beautiful kind of data of, hey, this is what people say most frequently. So it gives you an idea of what people care about the most. And the second thing is you get an idea of how people actually speak about their problems. And so you can actually kind of adjust copywriting, to their words. And then of course, like Quora, Reddit forums, like all of that stuff is golden for that as well.
Yeah, I think that's great for audience research. It's stuff I've often recommended for people to do to improve their businesses. Like if someone buys a business from us, like say Amazon FBA business, like one of the first steps, like go look at all the reviews, especially like 3.5 star reviews is usually where like most of the gold is because they like you, but not that much.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's so
that's often
true.
give you the most constructive feedback, right? So with audience research, you mentioned scraping, reviews, social media, all that kind of stuff, competitors. Is there anything else you're doing in audience research for CRO? Like what are some, practical ways a store owner can get a deeper understanding of their customer?
I think that is the main thing that we do because it's just this initial, you just gather a lot of kind of high level data. I think in terms of the other biggest thing is just actually talking to the customer. That's like just absolute gold as well. Of course, you can do surveying. You can kind of actually look at the user behavior, all of that stuff. So that is stuff we do as well. I had a meeting with Josh Snow, from Snow for Teeth Whitening. I don't know if you, I presume you
I
know
know
him.
of
Yeah,
Mr. Snow. I think I've talked to him maybe once or twice. But
Okay. Yeah, just one of the biggest like Shopify brands right now. And he said as well, like he still speaks to his customers. Like it's a 9-figure company, I think
right.
on the way to like multi like 9-figure now. And it's like literally he still just picks up the phone, tries to figure out more and more. Like that's fascinating. Like you're that far up, but and he's like his brain is like very kind of thinking in terms of leverage, like nonstop. So if he decides to still speak to his customers, like that says a lot about like how high of an opportunity that is.
Oh, for sure. And I think that is a extremely high leverage opportunity, even though it is still like 1-to-1, like he's doing it. But like if you understand the core emotional ticks that drives your customer, that bleeds into every system, right? It's so valuable, so important. So I could definitely see why he does that. I'm curious when you're doing these surveys or trading on the phone with customers, is there a certain like way you approach that? Because like for example, at Empire Flippers, we're trying to increase our Trustpilot reviews because Greg's cold email campaign pissed off a guy. He left us a 1 star. So we're trying to get, more of our customers on there. And, we've made over 90 millionaires, probably over 100 millionaires, to be honest, but 90 for sure that we know of. And we're trying to get them to leave us reviews. And it's often like pulling teeth, or if we're trying to get feedback in a survey, response rate very low. Our head of engineering, he tries to get on calls with them, like right after we paid them all this money, right? Like get on a call, let's talk about the experience. No one has booked it. So have you run into this where the audience is just like very apathetic, very tough to get a hold of? Like what's
For
your
sure.
solution to that?
Depends a lot on, of course, like I guess the brand identity is one of the most important things. Like how much do people really care about the brand in the first place? If it's something they're like very enthusiastic about, it's a lot lower barrier. Do I have any good solutions for that? Like I don't think so.
Come on, Jasper, solve my problems.
I think it's, just speak to the people that you want to speak to.
I think is one of the inherent pains of what we do because we're a very low volume, like high ticket type of business, right?
Yeah.
So we have all these like crazy good fans, absolutely love our brand, but they're not like actual customers, right? Versus like, a guy just about to buy a $10 million agency from us, another guy bought a $7 million agency, and like that guy's busy. His mind is not on the broker. His mind is on the $7 million deal he just did. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like they're moving fast, and our buyers in M&A typically are not loyal as well. They just go to wherever the deal is. But yeah, so low volume. So even like a 20% conversion rate might be like, a handful of people.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
So let's move back to Shopify. I was talking to Ben about this. I've talked to another CRO agency about this too, and it seems like you guys have a little bit of a different system here. But what stage of growth should an e-commerce business be at when they start investing seriously into CRO?
There's a lot of people in the space that would say like, oh, you don't need to pay any attention to this stuff. And like, yeah, I don't really agree with that entire kind of sentiment. Like, I really believe that like your conversion foundation, it's the growth engine of your business. And if you're able to actually just have a website that can, convert people no matter really what the, of course, there's absolutely no matter what the target audience is, but like, more so like the colder it gets, it doesn't really matter. You can still get people through the door. That's like, one of the best things you can actually do for your growth. I think it's mostly that the method of doing CRO changes a lot. So generally around like 1,000 orders, you can start to tinker with some tests. It's not going to be massive volume depending on, of course, how the funnel is set up. If 1,000 orders come through the same kind of, same product, then you have a bit more leeway. If it's all like different SKUs, then you're going to be quite limited. So there are some nuances within that. But, really, I think in the early stages, it's kind of CRO is just a lot more of an aggressive approach. Like you still want to, all of this data that we gather is still one of the most important things in the business to be gathering. Just from a quantitative perspective, there's not going to be a lot of data that is actually, it's directional, but it's not really, okay, this is like super conclusive. So that's the first thing to be aware of. But what you can be doing is just going a lot deeper into the qualitative data, right? So immediately having the surveys from the start, so you can start gathering more feedback, all the things we just spoke about, like just gathering all of that customer data. And then just instead of testing like the buttons and stuff, which is going to take forever and doesn't give you any kind of return, it's okay. Let's think high leverage. Like let's build, okay, we now push all this traffic to the product page. Let's kind of figure out a pre-sale angle and get a listicle that we can push traffic to. Like let's build a landing page that educates people more before they even get to the product, so that when they get to the product, they're already sold on the product. There's a lot of different kind of like higher leverage things to be looking at that can actually push the business forward, that are kind of, I guess it's not full on CRO, but it's still the same fundamentals. It's like gather the data and build just more aggressive adjustments.
Well, that's kind of CRO, right? Like, even if you're not like actively doing it, like on purpose, you're still doing it because everyone, unless you're a failed business, but even then, you have a conversion rate is just zero,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you
yeah,
are always
100%.
doing CRO technically. So from what it sounds like you're saying is like, if someone is relatively new, maybe they don't have a lot of data, they just started their store, like do best practices, at least like do the fundamentals. You can assume that should be okay to start with. But as you get more and more revenue, and now you have a little bit of money to play with on the marketing side, like when should someone like consider hiring someone like you, like a actual CRO agency? Like when do they have enough traffic, enough revenue where that makes sense?
It's a very good question. So how we personally structure it is a lot of times we don't see the best practices and such being like actually implemented particularly well, because there's just so many kind of leaks within that. Like even so, one
Of
of the things
course,
that we
yeah.
do as like a basically it's kind of a lead generation tool, but it's also like a genuine value add, is whenever we have our first meeting with a prospective client, we immediately have a mini CRO audit. So we're basically walking through all of these kind of high leverage opportunities of, hey, these are the things that should definitely be visible on your website. Now, the problem is sometimes someone will then take that mini audit and they're like, okay, this is great. I can do it myself. Thank you. Bye bye. And then they just completely like just misinterpret some things, or like it's not that vague. It's pretty clear, but it's just like, completely just like misimplemented in a way that is actually not conversion friendly. And yeah, it's like, first thing, okay, you need to understand exactly what is wrong. Then you need to figure out, have the like design capacity to actually properly implement all of these things in a way that is actually, UI UX has the proper like UI UX principles backing it. And then the third thing is, of course, you need someone to properly implement it. So that in and of itself is not as easy to figure out, I think, by yourself. So that's kind of why we have kind of two approaches ourselves. We have one kind of entry offer where basically we just fix up whatever is clearly broken on the website. And so that's where pretty much any brand can benefit from that, unless like maybe one, I don't know if that's the exact number, maybe one out of like 50 stores that come to us, we're like, okay. And especially I guess for the higher, revenue ones, where if a store does 1 million a month, we're not going to be like, hey, let's do an aggressive redesign and change everything on your website. Like, of course not. Especially in the like up to 100K a month range, most people will not have really focused that much on CRO yet. And there's just so many obvious opportunities that we're just like, hey, get all these best practices out of the way. And then from there, we can look at, okay, now you already see results, from our service, first of all. So it makes it kind of more easy for people to do any kind of ongoing work together. But then the second thing is, I forgot what the second thing is. I completely lost my
What a
train of thought.
tease! What a tease!
Refresh my memory.
We'll just sit here in an awkward silence, Jasper.
Okay. No, I completely lost my
We're
train of
leaving
thought.
this in the podcast. No,
Sorry for that.
I think that makes sense, man. Maybe if
I
you
was
move
on a
on to
roll, and then it
the
ended.
next one, yeah. But like what you said there, I think is very on point. Like people don't touch this stuff. And to be honest, it's not just CRO. Like when an entrepreneur, like I've sold so many of them, man. Like over 24 in businesses we've sold now. And it is so common that a seller sells a business and the buyer sees what they were doing, like in terms of SEO or paid ads or whatever their thing was, right? And realize like, wow, like you really just let this thing get bloated and like is super unoptimized and all that kind of stuff. So like often there's so much wins in the acquisition in just like slowing down and optimizing this thing, whether it's CRO, the SEO, the paid media, whatever it is, right? Like I was doing a consult with a friend and I was looking at his P&L, and just by changing out one of the softwares that he did, which he had been using the software for years and years and years, right? And he just got complacent and just never looked at what else is on the market these days. Just replacing that one software would increase his valuation by 40% because like it was so expensive versus what is available today. Stuff like
Wow.
this happens all the time with businesses and entrepreneurs. So I agree with you. People should spend some time to just focus and nail on that thing. And it's so valuable, able to
Yeah.
increase your, I mean, in your experience, so you've served a few pretty big Shopify stores now, or decently sized. On average, what do you see as the conversion rate lift? Like, are they getting like 15, 30% higher, or what kind of lift are they seeing?
Yeah, so the average that we see is around 32%. So that
Uh-huh.
is 32%. So that's
Very
within a
good.
month of doing the redesign. So as I mentioned, like this, if a store is already super dialed in, we're not going to just do this kind of like full on revamp. So of course it's like $1 million a month client, unless we did do it one time because it was like a very, very kind of dated store. That is an edge case. Like if a store is already doing that much revenue, generally speaking, they kind of know what they're doing at this stage. They've already invested some money into doing CRO. So then it's more so, doing the small tweaks, and those will generally be, a couple percentages at a time. But yeah, that aggressive redesign is generally around 30% range.
That makes sense. We did a crazy aggressive redesign of our evaluation tool years ago, and I think increased our leads by like 150%, which, when you're selling in seven-figure business is a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, even 32%, like I know for Shopify, you have your COGS and physical good costs, but like that's a
100%.
massive increase to your valuation. That could be hundreds of thousands of dollars increase to your valuation with that 32% increase. So this is again why everyone should be focusing on doing CRO once you hit a certain
Yeah.
revenue point. So I can't let you go off this podcast though without talking about the elephant in the room, of course, which is how is AI changing everything in the CRO world? Is it staying like relatively the same, or is AI kind of disrupting everything like it has been doing in a lot of the SEO circles?
Well, I mean, luckily it's not as kind of hectic, I guess, on the SEO
It's
side.
pretty hectic on the SEO side for
Yeah,
sure.
I can see it's even like the recent changes in Google and such. It's, yeah, let's say dynamic.
This is a very polite way of saying it for
Yeah.
sure.
I think in terms of AI, like right now with the stage that most companies are at, like, you have these tools where you can, of course, do like super personalized approaches. Like you can basically change most of the buyer's journey against like another person, and it's like completely kind of adjusted. Like this kind of personalization, like is just not really relevant for 99% of the stores unless you're doing like a, absolutely crazy amount of.
But by personalization, what do you mean? Like, what would be an example of like over the top personalization?
So it would completely adjust like a page based off of the information that it gets of that specific buying persona. And so the problem with that, primarily from my perspective, is at the beginning you're still trying to kind of optimize just the basic things, doing proper A/B testing, trying to figure out one thing versus the other, and you're trying to gather that data. If you do mass personalization, you have very kind of there is no clear conclusion kind of
Yeah.
to be made.
It would be like me going to a fitness store and it mass personalizes as I'm looking at a dumbbell, like, hey, Greg, maybe you should stop playing D&D, you fat loser. Like, no! How did it know?
Pretty much.
Not very useful.
Yeah, 100%.
of a broad sense, right? Because not
Yeah.
everyone is going to respond to that well. Like me, I will. Like I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah.
No one insults D&D to me.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. I mean, if you have a million different personalizations, you're never going to get any useful data. So
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. One of the things that we do like to use, for example, with Rebuy engine, it's one of the tools we quite frequently use. It allows you to basically just do a whole bunch of, mainly it's upsells like all over the customer journey. There's some small things. It allows you to have like a nice cart slider with some nice functionality and a bunch of things. But that uses like AI as well to it's like just give recommendations based off of that persona and basically try to tailor the recommendations of these products are most likely to get purchased by that person. That's one of the things that we do see. We like to implement it, but then of course you kind of need to back it with proper like algorithmic structure of you can kind of guideline of hey above $100 you kind of want to, let's say the average order value is high, you want to give it different products, like you can kind of give it these like edge case, like I guess it's not edge case like guardrails, so it's not like full on, let's say gung-ho.
gotcha.
Bandit testing, of course, is a big one. I guess it's not like full on AI. I presume that's more like algorithmic based, but it's price testing, for example. Then
I'm
of
sure
course,
the vendors of the algorithms are saying it's AI though, because
yeah, exactly,
it's good market.
100%. Yeah, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
confusion, right?
we
It's like
used to call this an
everybody just calls it
automation.
AI.
Now it's an AI.
Yeah, exactly. No, so that's one thing. But there's of course a lot of like utility with that. And I think most of all, like the way I'm working on integrating like AI into our systems. Firstly, it's of course like the analysis part of all of this data that we're scraping. If you do it with a assistant, it's going to take like forever to get done. If you use proper AI, you can actually speed up the workflow. You just have to kind of prompt it carefully and kind of use the right tools so it gives you actually a valid, like usable output. And then the other thing is, I think like one of the things right now that I'm looking at is like AI. Apparently, it can watch like heat maps. It can watch like session recordings. It can like actually, like actually start analyzing all of this stuff. And so, looking at I don't know, like 1,000 session recordings, like every week, it's already feasible for an assistant to do. But in AI, you can just train it and just have it sit through and then build reports based off of that.
Oh, that's a
Another
huge
thing,
productivity unlock
yeah,
right there.
100%.
We've been
Yeah.
doing stuff with Post Hog, and I'm not super familiar with Post Hog, but just like watching the heat map videos, the session recordings, like, oh my god! one of the
Yeah.
guys like click around for like 18 minutes, like, what are you doing?
For sure. I'm the same. It's like I can't do that. It's brain is too wired to yeah be doing that.
So it sounds like AI hasn't really exploded in a way that is like disrupting how you do CRO. It sounds like it's more of a productivity unlock that's happening in the industry.
100%. Yeah, it's more. It's I guess like just enabler of like okay, you can get more people to. I guess especially in terms of like the data analysis. I think we can. That's really kind of my main focus is like, hey, how can we get to a point where first of all we don't really need to hire a bunch more analysts, but then it's like actually how can we make it better than a human doing it?
Right.
And I think if you feed it the right data, it can come to the right conclusions. Largely, of course, you still have to have a human kind of verify it, and just having the right kind of overviews can help a lot with that. But yeah, I think that's the main thing is just getting a few people to just replace like a big team. That's the biggest difference right now.
I want to talk about like useful metrics, but before we do, I want to linger a bit on kind of the process here. So we talked a bit about the audience research, which sounds like we are in agreement that's extremely important. Not enough people focus on that. But I also want to touch on the mechanical side, which we've kind of hinted at. So the mechanical side, in my mind at least, and you correct me if I'm wrong, would be the front end product, whatever you're driving the ads to or whatever, and then the upsells, downsells, order bumps, all that kind of stuff. So maybe go through a bit on that flow. Like, where do you see people make mistakes on the mechanical side of the CRO?
Mhm. Depends on the size of the company, but especially like when they're kind of starting to implement these kind of tweaks, it's just mostly not very tailored to what's actually beneficial for the customer journey. So just kind of random recommendations of just because you put a bunch of bundled products on a product doesn't mean anyone's going to ever use it. And same like add to cart, like pop up like in the carts when people purchase, like all of this stuff. They're great kind of in between opportunities to actually get people to buy more. But you really have to think through, okay, what is this customer's intent? What do they actually want to solve? And how can I actually give them something that is actually going to make a difference? That is one of the things that I would look at there. Outside of that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of best practices to focus on. We generally, maybe to give some kind of context on these metrics that we like to focus on, because then we can actually kind of guide, where
Sure.
to direct our attention. One of the biggest metrics that people do not actually aren't generally even aware of, it's product discovery. So it's like all the traffic you get on the website, how many people even reach the product page so you can sell them something. So if we look kind of like high level, these are kind of the four metrics we like to look at ourselves. It's product discovery, how many people actually land on the product page, add to cart, begin checkout, and then actually complete the checkout. So for
Just
us,
real quick, how does the product discovery metric work? So you have like say 10,000 visitors to a website, 1,000 go to the product page. Is the product discovery percentage like 10%? Is that kind of what you're
yeah,
looking at?
correct. So I guess the strict definition would be starts a session on your website and views an item.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so for us, like the kind of benchmark there is 50 to 70% of the people. But I mean, of course, that's any kind of benchmark numbers here, especially for like product discovery. It can be misleading if you say you have like a ton of traffic coming just to your blog page. It's going to be quite difficult to get 50 to 70% on your products, because the reason they even visit your page is educational. But yeah, that's pretty much the benchmark we like to kind of shoot for.
So 50 to 70% product discovery, is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah, correct.
And do you find that, like, let's say, like, I've sold a few businesses with, dozens of SKUs. They might have that 50 to 70% product discovery, but it turns out like it's all going to like their least profitable product or something like that.
Interesting.
Like, do you come across stuff like that? And what would be your recommendation for that e-commerce store owner? Like, hey, I got good product discovery, but I want it to be more on this SKU because I know this is a good margin SKU, but I know it converts on the flow with like these themed bundle of items or whatever. What would be your advice?
Mhm. That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have like good advice. Like, I mean, first of all, I presume it depends a lot on the traffic flow. Like, first of all, there's a reason why people select that specific product, right? So it's like, if people want, I don't know, like sponges, then we're not going to be able to sell them t-shirts, right? It's like,
I
so
have
I
a
think
feeling
it's,
about my sponge audience, Jasper.
maybe we can sell them a t-shirt with a sponge. Like
I
we can
like the
kind of get
option.
the
I'll bring you back.
balance. But yeah, I think that's firstly, okay, important to look at, like, okay, what is the viability of that? But I mean, within that, of course, you can put things more into the customer journey. So just even adding it as a separate product is something I would be looking at, like on the product page. Like if you want to kind of direct people in a certain way of like, hey, these are the other products that you should be looking at, or people that buy this also frequently buy this thing. Depends, of course, if it's like a complementary product to this. Adding any kind of higher average order value products high up. Also in terms of collection pages, say people get a lot of visitors actually coming to a specific product or collection page, and then they select a cheaper product. Of course, placing the higher average order value products first. It's also just beneficial in terms of anchoring, so people have a higher price expectation, and they keep looking. They see these cheaper options. Yeah, I think those are some of the things I would be looking at.
Gotcha. And I think this is a good question for you too, since you seem like a very data qualified person or good at looking at data. I've seen, and this has happened at Empire Flippers, it's happened at different businesses I've helped sell as well, where the owner, the entrepreneur generates like all these data, all these dashboards, all these reports, and they have tons of metrics, like crazy amounts of metrics, but there's
Mhm.
zero insights. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Right.
Yeah.
So I think this is a common problem people have where they like create these metrics of data, but then they have no idea how to even get an insight from them. So what's the best way for the business owner to turn test results, this data into something that's actionable? Like how do they cross that threshold or translate the data into action?
I think first of all, with like most of the biggest problem with a lot of this data is it's just observational, right? So if we look at Google Analytics data, Shopify data, like I guess qualitative I mean, that kind of still fits the same bucket of like heat maps, click maps, scroll maps. All of
Mhm.
these data points, they show you what people do, but it doesn't give you any insight into why people are actually doing things. And so I think the single best metric, there is this Bezos quote of like the success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we run per year, per month, per week, per day. Like I think the best metric is just how many experiments are you running if you are in a position where you can you have the volume to actually take care of that. Because when you test one thing versus another thing on your website, it's the cleanest like possible data you're going to get. You compare like the exact same like audience that was already coming there. You could be, you compare two different versions and you see how people actually behave on one version versus another. That is the only kind of data I think we can get on the website where it's like clear, okay, this impacted people in a certain way. Now, of course, you have to once again be very careful of interpreting that data of like, okay, what does this actually mean? Is this actually statistically significant? All these kind of questions. But yeah, that's why I'm a very big fan of CRO, because then you actually usable data versus, okay, this number, we have a 3% conversion rate, right? Like we worked with one store, so this 8-figure client where we did like a very aggressive redesign. We basically got their conversion rate from 0.1% to 0.17%. If you think, 0.17%, that sounds like a horrible conversion rate. But for them, it's like, they get so many people that just visit for SEO. It's like completely not really related to buying products. Then their average order value, I think, is, if I remember correctly, like $1,500 or something. So there are so many different variables that go into this where throwing out any kind of benchmark numbers, it's mostly arbitrary. Like it can be directional in the first stage, but I think as soon as possible, you would want to just actually start testing, and where possible, using actual customer data, which is a bit more directional than just people aren't converting well, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, like your point there, that does sound small, but I get what you're saying. Like at scale, even small wins lead to big things, right? Like you convert like an extra 1% of a million people.
Yeah,
That's a lot of revenue. So
100%.
I get what you're saying there for sure. And I do agree. I think CRO data is a little bit more, maybe not inherently insightful, but it can be a bit easier to kind of like divine the bones of like what you should be doing, right? Once a Shopify store owner has these like fundamentals, decently solid, like their CRO, maybe they've hired you guys, they've increased, they got that 32% lift that you guys are averaging. What can they do as entrepreneurs to make CRO a part of the way they are scaling their business versus just fixing the kind of leaky bucket in their sales funnel?
I think, firstly, it's the biggest problem that we see, especially when companies go into like the 6, 7, figure range, depending on the actual size of the market. Very often they kind of cap out their ability to convert people. Where if they try to spend more, they try to scale up their traffic, it doesn't actually benefit them anymore. Anytime they try to scale up, they actually just reduce their ROAS, and it's not a sustainable business model. And so what's kind of happening there is that they're essentially selling to this warmest segment of the market that everybody else is already selling to, right? So it's like the most competitive space.
The red ocean.
Yeah, exactly. And you're kind of tapped out because, well, fundamentally because of how your entire flow, is set up. And of course, well, CRO kind of also caters to, okay, making sure that what happens on the creative side is matching what they receive when they go on the website. It's a combination of making sure that the actual like inflow of leads is actually, high quality and everything like that. But even from a perspective of, I think, for example, do you know the company Blissy?
Blissy. I don't know
Yeah.
if I know them. Maybe. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
So they're like, I love this company. They literally sell close to like 100 million a year. And they just sell pillowcases to people who do not want to buy pillowcases. Like it's the most incredible business model. Like it's incredible. Like they scaled their company, to like close to 9 figures, selling stuff to people that do not initially want that product. So they literally just create artificial demand with the way that their entire funnel is set up. And so I think that's really, if you think from a perspective of like the extra value of CRO, like fundamentally it's really about like, okay, how can we expand our product to a larger segment of the market that might not already be looking for this product, that might not really be aware. And so doing more and more education. Then once again, the research comes in, like making sure you actually understand, okay, now you have to look at this colder audience. How aware are they? What are their problems? How can we kind of bridge that gap? But that's really, what allows you to scale with
Yeah.
CRO.
So you're going after the bigger market that is problem unaware, basically.
Yeah, and not many competitors in that, right? Like people,
For sure.
it's the hardest to sell
Much
to,
harder
so
to
not many
convert
people do it. But if you crack that, like it's a very kind of big opportunity, and you can scale quite fast.
I'm curious on Blissy. How do they sell to people that don't want the product? Is every customer just filling out the credit card order, just like I hate this company? What's going on there? How did they do it?
Yeah. No, it's, I don't know. It's just incredible. Like, it's mostly just creating a problem out of thin air. It's like, all of these like images of like how dirty your pillowcase is, and then it's, I don't know what they exactly do on the front. I know the landing page is like, your regular pillowcase is completely messed up. It has this and this and this and this impact on your sleep. This is why you need a better option. It's just very kind of simple in terms of the approach,
Got
but it's like, of course, super expansive, and then the
They're
flows they
introducing
have.
the problem and agitating the problem.
Yeah,
I
they
see.
literally create the problem out of thin air and then they
They're
sell it.
true marketers.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm like so impressed with
Do you own a
that.
Blissy pillowcase yourself?
Not yet.
Wow, dude.
I do very often, so
Jasper, I'm going to help you out after this podcast. I'll send you my Blissy affiliate link. All right.
that's good. I do very often show like these kind of products where I keep using them as examples, and then I just start loving the product. Like, I don't know how that works subconsciously, but I just buy it because I look at it so much.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so how often should businesses like be revisiting their optimizations? Like I said, like the people I do know that do it, they'll like do it for 3 months, 6 months, and then just never touch
Mhm.
it again. So, in
Mhm.
your experience, like how often should they be doing like these broad scale tests, or maybe they downsize to like a little bit of tests, or just stop for a little bit? Like, what's your take on that?
Firstly, I think you should never really stop testing, especially if you say, you're paying literally in some way to get people to your website, whether it be, with your time, whether it be with your money. Like, you're putting all this effort into getting people to the website. And so anytime you're not utilizing that data, you're essentially kind of burning money because you're not actually getting more insights that can help you, figure out more to make things more
Mhm.
efficient. And so generally speaking, I would always basically be testing. In terms of retesting things, we don't really do this, to be honest, ourselves. Of like, I know there are some people in the space that are like, after 6 to 12 months we always try to retest this kind of stuff and just make sure it's still valid and whatever. For us, it's more so just looking at the overall metrics of like, hey, if the performance consistently starts dipping on a certain funnel, or we tap into a much different target audience, or it's a lot colder, then there are kind of cases where, hey, okay, there is a significant change here, let's actually look at how this performs. And I think that's like the most obvious of like, okay, we see a decrease in the overall performance. That's actually just this. We see a significant change in the way the funnel flows. Let's retest this.
Gotcha. So it's kind of ad hoc based on what the data is telling you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, we're at the rapid fire section, my man. So I'm going to ask you three quick questions. You give me three quick answers. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. No pressure, but it's better be good. It's better be good answers. All right. First question: what is the best hidden growth opportunity on Shopify today?
The biggest thing I would say is server side tracking. I guess it's not specific to Shopify, but just, your data is pretty much useless. It's becoming more and more useless with the amount of restrictions coming in. So you really need a setup of, okay, proper server side tracking, proper first party data and zero party data being captured and being fed, to your ads. How do you call it? Like the brokers, I guess. I'm not sure that's the right word, like Meta and such. That is, yeah, the biggest thing that I would be focusing on making sure that that is taken care of.
The first party data is things like Meta's Cappy, or are you using like something
Yeah.
else to do first party, or like how do you normally do it?
Yeah, yeah. So we generally use Stape that allows you to actually host the server side like setup. And then we have Google Tag Manager. Through that Google Tag Manager, we route everything towards Google Ads, TikTok, about any kind of, ad platform.
Gotcha. What tools or resources can people use to help them optimize their Shopify stores?
Okay, so I'm impressed how often people do not do this. Google Analytics, make sure it's properly set up. Like, just hire someone if you have to. Just have everything properly configured. Because for any kind of brand, like any kind of agency, any kind of expert like us or anyone to come in at any stage, if you scale all the way up, you don't actually utilize this data. Let alone, of course, first of all, you are probably not going to be able to utilize it very well. But especially for people that like to go deeper and are able to use that data more effectively than you as just the Shopify entrepreneur as a whole, it allows us to actually come in and make the biggest possible difference. Microsoft Clarity, anything like Hotjar, any kind of tool that allows you to actually capture heat maps, click maps, scroll maps, look at session recordings, all of that stuff. You said just one. I'm keeping
No, those
going,
are
but
good
yeah,
lists. I did say plural tools, right? So that's good.
okay. I would add rebuy as well. So in terms of like upselling,
What does Rebuy do? It just helps you with upsells.
yeah, it's basically it's a kind of an all-in-one kind of I guess they sell it as like a all-in-one growth engine kind of thing. It just allows you to add like a cart drawer, lots of upsells anywhere. Like there's, I think, like 20 different options of upsells anywhere like throughout the page. So
Cool.
that's a great one. Then for A/B testing, Intelligence or OmniConverge is what we use. UpCart is a great cart drawer functionality that I would be looking at if you do not have a cart drawer on the website already. In pretty much all situations, a cart slider is generally more conversion friendly than a separate cart page with a separate slider. These kind of functionalities that you very often see. Yeah, I think those are the main things. Also, post-purchase survey. Kno is something you can use. I think there is a bunch of tools, but I would
Yeah.
always just have a post-purchase survey so at least capture the data of people actually making purchase.
Gotcha. All right. Final question, most important question. What has been your funniest moment since you started working in the CRO world?
So I literally have no answer for this.
You've never had a funny moment? Like, man.
This podcast has been the funniest moment.
Well, you can tell Ben that you submitted his business for sale with me. Maybe that will bring a smile to his eyes,
That sounds good.
Excellent. Well, if I'm the funniest moment, we're going to have to help you out, Jasper, and get you some more wacky antics in your burgeoning career as a CRO. But before we do that, now that we're at the end of the podcast, where should I send people to if they wanted to maybe hire Golden Web for CRO for their own Shopify store, or they just want to talk to you about CRO and learn a little bit more? Where should people go and connect with you?
Very old school, but Jasper at goldenweb.net. So that would be the easiest way to actually connect with me. Yeah, I'm an email guy. And feel free to connect on LinkedIn and all of these different platforms. Golden Web, the website is very dated, so we don't even have like a CRO function on that. I will be working with our designers to improve that very shortly, so no way
That's
to
a
contact
classic
us there.
agency problem.
It's literally, it shows the business is doing well. The people that don't make money, they constantly work on their websites.
Right, right,
With
right.
us, it's been this way before I even met Benjamin. I think like since I met him, it's been the same.
I have a friend. He has like a close to 7-figure agency. He doesn't even have a website.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'll get around to it eventually. But yeah, that's a very classic agency thing. But cool. We'll put your email in the show notes, man. I appreciate you coming on and talking shop. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.